Hi, my name's Melissa, and today I'm going to be talking about why I broke up with first aid. For some context, it's been about a week since I took my board exams, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on how I studied and what I would have done differently. So during the month of January, that's when I really started studying for boards. And if you're anything like me, you've heard about the gospel of first aid. All the upperclassmen say, oh, just study first aid. That's all you need for boards. Just read through first aid. I'd only briefly skimmed through first aid during my didactic courses, and I really didn't find it that helpful. I would try to look through it towards the end of a course right before an exam, and I honestly just thought it was a little too superficial. But I thought, oh, it'll probably get better once I'm actually in board season. So come January, I finally started reading first aid with earnest. During the month of January, my board studying consisted of reading, or attempting to read, a section of first aid every night. And y'all, that was the single biggest regret of my whole board studying career. Now before you crucify me in the comments, let me explain. Every hour I spent reading first aid felt like a black hole of nothing. I was just passively flipping through the pages, reading everything with the same sense of urgency or lack thereof, and I really just didn't find it helpful at all. After reading a section, I felt like I couldn't even tell you what I had just read. It felt like my time was just being sucked down into a vortex with nothing to show for it. Now looking back, I think it probably didn't help that I was relegating my first aid studying to the end of the day when I was pretty burnt out from already going through all of my schoolwork. But even when I tried to read first aid towards the beginning of the day when my mind was freshest, I still didn't feel like anything was going in. But even though I kept having this feeling that first aid just wasn't it for me, I was reluctant to give it up just because so many people were saying, oh, just read first aid, just read first aid. So what finally tipped me over the edge and led me to breaking up with first aid? It was practice questions. Around February, I started finally doing TrueLearn practice questions, and the difference was instant. Practice questions felt like an IV drip of information straight into my brain. Unlike with passively reading first aid, the practice questions were just so much more active, so much more engaging and interesting, and I actually remembered what I was learning. Now during the first 2 years of didactics, I always knew that practice questions and active recall were the golden ticket towards better learning. Practice questions were the cornerstone of my learning during didactics, and I think a big reason of how I got a 3.99 GPA. But still, just to see how starkly different and better practice questions were compared to just reading first aid was still a really jarring experience. Towards the end of February, I was still clinging on to the hope that maybe first aid would come through. I was now trying to use it in a more targeted manner and just reviewing the topics I kept getting wrong on my practice questions. But even then, I just felt it was more useful to just make an Anki card directly from the reviews at the end of a practice question, rather than having to flip through first aid again. After just a week of hitting practice questions, I knew it was finally time to say goodbye to first aid. From March to May, I had officially abandoned first aid. Now, the pillars of my board studying were TrueLearn and UWorld practice questions, Anki, and video resources like Dirty Medicine, Sketchy, or Pixorize. Real talk, Dirty Medicine did way more for me than first aid ever did. I've always preferred video learning, so once I transitioned to pretty much exclusively watching videos for my content review instead of first aid, I was so much happier and the information was finally sticking. So, with all this being said, if you love first aid, am I telling you not to use it? Of course not, do whatever you want. So I guess the whole point of this video is for anyone who thinks that first aid just isn't working for them, maybe it's time to break up. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to see a video of my complete board study schedule, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.